I realize looking back now that I am terrible at remembering to film stuff. Hey there, and welcome back to another edition of A couple of weeks ago, I went up to Whistler in Canada to celebrate a friend's birthday, along with about 11 other people. So this is kind of the journey of that trip. I'll fill in the details that past me left out, forgot to film. So my friends were flying into Vancouver from LA, and since I live in Seattle, it's pretty close. So I decided to make the drive up from Seattle to Vancouver and park at the airport and then meet my friends there. Then we would all get onto a private bus that we had rented, which we dubbed the party bus, and had a driver take us up the snowy roads to Whistler. The Vancouver airport actually is pretty dope and it's probably one of the calmest airports I've ever been to. There's not a whole lot of people rushing, and there's smooth jazz being played all the time. Luckily, they also had a food court outside of the security area, so I could eat and chill while waiting for everyone else to show up. The drive up wasn't too bad. I'd only gotten about 2 hours of sleep the night before, so I spent half the ride up to Whistler catching up with people, and then the other half just kind of sleeping. Whistler is basically a real life winter wonderland. It is super beautiful up there. So the parts that I left out on the first day is we had stopped at a place called the Brew House to get some lunch, some brews and poutine, which is a Canadian delicacy of French fries, cheese curds, and gravy. I think I'd gotten a pale ale and a burger because I was starving and wanted something that would fill me up the rest of the day. Totally forgot where we went to dinner, so probably was not that memorable. The next day we went to a place called Hot Buns Bakery. I'd gotten a breaky crepe, which was pretty good, but I had to kind of scarf it down because we were on a time crunch to make it to snowshoeing. Snowshoeing was super beautiful, but it was also a terribly hard workout. Definitely prep your leg muscles and do some cardio before going because it'll completely wreck you. I was not having it at all at some times. It is very beautiful and definitely one of those moments where you're one with nature, but maybe it's just kind of a do it once thing and be done. I'll leave you with some footage of it now. After snowshoeing, I was super looking forward to some food and a beer because my legs were dead. We went to this place called Hunter Gather, which is supposed to cater to meat eaters and vegetarians, hence being named Hunter Gather. They also had a fair amount of craft beers, which is always nice. The meat in there smelled really good when we walked in, which usually always tricks me. And so I ordered the barbecue beef brisket plate, which was just okay, and I got a maple porter beer, which was actually pretty good. For dinner, we went to one of the fanciest restaurants in Whistler called Araxi. Originally, we had made a reservation for our group about 3 months out, but I guess they had canceled it on their end with no warning to us, which kind of sucked, but luckily, they managed to accommodate us and gave us a lot of free stuff for the mix-up, so it was all good. We got some free appetizers, which were pretty delicious, and we had also ordered something known as a seafood tower, and it was a literal seafood tower, but everything on there was delicious. I'd also tried caviar for the first time there and decided it was not for me. I had gotten a Yukon Atlantic char fish for dinner. The fish itself was just alright, but the sides that came with the dish were pretty good. They also gave us some complimentary desserts, which was pretty good as well. The next morning we went to a place called Stone Edge, which was probably my favorite restaurant of the entire trip. I'd gotten a coffee and a traditional breakfast, which was basically eggs, toast, potatoes, and sausage. I don't know how they cooked their eggs, but those were the best damn eggs I've ever had in my life. I also took a look at their cocktail menu, and it looked super amazing, so I wanted to come back later that night to get a couple drinks. After that, we were all ready for some coffee, so we took a trip to Mount Curie Coffee, which had probably my favorite coffee drink of the whole trip. They had something called a Canadiano, which was basically Americano with maple syrup mixed in, and it was super delicious. Then, of course, because it was freezing outside, we had to go and get some ice cream. We went to the main ice cream place in Whistler called Cows, which has a whole wide selection of different types of ice cream. I got a caramel macchiato, which is pretty good. Throughout the day, I was constantly thinking about going back to Stone's Edge to get a drink, so of course I made it a point to our group to head over there to get some drinks in the evening. They had a whole list of old-fashioned inspired drinks, which had their own different bases of alcohol and their own simple mixes. I got the rum old-fashioned, which was rum, coffee, and chocolate bitters, and cinnamon syrup. It was by far my favorite alcohol drink of the entire trip. I also saw that they had a Vesper on the menu, which is a James Bond classic, so I always order it whenever I see it on a drink menu. The next morning I set out on a solo mission to get breakfast at the Naked Sprout Juice Bar, and picked up a tuna avocado wrap and some sort of like bean chips with it, and a matcha shake which had matcha, dates, and banana. All of it was very delicious and very healthy, which was a nice change of pace to some of the meals and snacks that we had. I was also hungover that day, so eating something healthy was very welcome. The place actually had a very LA sort of vibe, which made me feel like I was back in my hometown, but in the snow, which was a nice feeling. And then after that, it was time to start heading home. We loaded our stuff back onto our party bus, and headed from Whistler back down to Vancouver. We made it a point to stop by one restaurant in Vancouver, though, called Medina, which is absolutely amazing place to eat, and I highly recommend it. They have these like personal Belgian waffles, and they bring them out fresh and hot for you, with your choice of dipping sauce, and they're one of the best things on the planet. They are super amazing. I wish I could eat them all the time. For actual food, I had gotten one of their daily specials, which was a frittata, which is also very delicious. Unfortunately, because I was hungover, all I wanted to drink was water. Otherwise, I really wanted to try some of their coffee too. Then after that, we just kind of wandered around Vancouver for a little bit. We headed into Gastown, which is like this sort of steampunky vibe, but not really. But there's some cool stuff to look at. Then we all parted ways and made our respective ways home. Them flying back to LA and me driving back down to Seattle. Although I did make a pit stop while I was still in Canada to pick up some bear butter, which is basically Canadian craft peanut butter, which I think is the best peanut butter on the planet, and I will fight you on that. But yeah, that was kind of my trip around Whistler and a little bit of Vancouver. So yeah, overall pretty good trip. I very much enjoyed it. So hopefully you enjoyed watching me on this trip too.